So in the title it says how to make a fruitcake. So I'm going to pull a reverse blog here and show you how to make a fruitcake first, and then we'll get to the history after.
Let's make a good fruitcake. For this we'll need dried fruits, flour, baking powder, winter spices, orange, nuts, butter, brown sugar, and eggs. For extra winter magic, rum and fortified wine. We'll start by taking our dried fruit and chopping up the larger pieces. Then in the bowl, add in the rum and some hot water. Pour a spice syrup made with 1 part sugar, 2 parts water, and the winter spices. Let that sit anywhere from an hour to a day, but not much longer than that. In a stand mixer, cream up the butter and sugar until it's light and airy. While that's happening, combine the flour, spices, and baking powder in a separate bowl. Once the sugar and butter are appropriately creamed, add in an egg, 1 at a time. There's 1, there's another 1, and then 3 more times, followed by the flour mix. This next step you can do in the mixer or by hand, but what we're going to do is mix in the nuts, orange juice and zest, and the fruit mix. Pour all of that into a greased up pan and into an oven at 300 degrees for an hour and a half to bake. Pop it out of the pan once it's cool, wrap it in a cheesecloth, and then douse it in fortified wine, or rum for a flambé. Let it soak for about a week and there you have it. A delicious fruitcake.
Deviled egg sandwiches. Oh, you're still here. Thought you would have left after the recipe. Well, I'm glad you stuck around because fruitcake is the dessert that everyone loves to hate on. For good reason. The fruitcake that you get at the grocery store with like the candied fruit inside that's overly sweet, kind of tangy, and has that weird kind of bitterness to it is not an apt representation of this delicious and ancient dessert. A dessert that has its origins that go all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia almost 5,000 years ago, where they would make a bread with honey, dried fruits, and nuts. Dried fruits, including figs, which if you're going to only put 1 dried fruit in your fruitcake, I would highly recommend it be figs. Peasants in the 12th century may never eat a fig in their lives, and people these days may also never eat a fig in their lives. The time you were born does not determine whether or not you can eat a fig. There were dark times in history where only the royals were eating figs. They're just so rich and festive and taste like Christmas. These Mesopotamian fruitcakes were also rich and festive, so much so that they were made as an offering to the gods in order to appease them, and try to convince them not to send a flood of biblical proportions down their way, which for most of history worked. As time would go on, fruitcakes would begin to pop up in neighboring regions such as China, Greece, and ancient Rome, who had their own version made of a variety of grains and dried fruits which would then be soaked in honey and or wine called satura. Sometimes it would be sent off with soldiers to keep their calories up, and other times it would be enjoyed during Saturnalia. From there, it would evolve into the fruitcake that we know now around the 14th century when a dessert called plum cake began to take off. Plum is a bit of a misnomer in our modern vocabulary, but back then, plum referred to any kind of dried fruit. Be it raisins, apricots, plums. The cakes would be seasoned with the rarest spices you could find during that time, such as cinnamon or clove. Even without refrigeration, they would be made well in advance to when they would be enjoyed, preserved with a healthy soaking of wine. Something that is still done to this very day. There are stories of fruitcakes being over 50 years old. There's a set of sisters that keep regifting the same one. Johnny Carson famously joked that there's only one fruitcake in the world and we keep passing it around, which is around the time that fruitcake would fall out of favor with the general public. Now it has a reputation of being the worst thing you could bring to a dinner party. A reputation that I don't think it deserves. Fruitcake, just like Brussels sprouts, are a victim of people just doing a bad job with them. Any food can be terrible if you just don't put the care into it. No one wants a boiled Brussels sprout, just like no one wants a boiled cake. Have you been following along with the ingredients we've mentioned here? You got nuts, dried figs, wine, all encompassed in a cake. How did we as a society turn this into something that's bad? This isn't a cake you have to enjoy right away. You can let it sit for years and enjoy it like a fine wine. And yet we see this as something to be feared and run away from? Sure, grocery store fruitcakes might not be very good, but that doesn't mean we need to trash on the whole genre. You know what else isn't good in a grocery store bakery? Donuts. But you don't see anyone poo-pooing all over them. But there's many different kinds of donuts, but only one fruitcake, I might hear you saying. Which could not be further from the truth. Fruitcake is the epitome of family recipe. No two are going to be the same. So much so that I wouldn't say fruitcake is just a dessert, but more of a category of desserts. If something can be made and then left to soak for up to a year, you are going to have so much variation there. Then there's the individual ingredients you can put in there. Here, close your eyes. Imagine a fruit. I can see that you're imagining an apple, but I need you to be a little more creative than that. Because the options are vast. You got figs, dates, apricots, sultanas, raisins, cranberries, bananas, even apples if you really want. And don't even get me started on spices. Imagine saffron in a fruitcake soaked in a fine Madeira. Now that's the kind of thing that will wake you up all hot and bothered in the middle of the night. And if you have leftover fruit, turn it into a syrup and make a nice old fashioned with it. But depending on how you make your fruitcake and how much you have, you might not need it. So basically what I'm saying is the next time someone offers you a fruitcake, don't be a jerk. And thank you for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can come back here next year when I try this fruitcake that I made earlier. A full 365 days from now. Will it be good?